Welcome back, Pouring Nation. I have a special guest in today's video.
Hey everybody, I'm Anna Blount.
And today we're going to review some of the artwork that you guys sent in to us to talk about some of the things we think you could do to improve. So next up, we have Manaki, and I apologize, I probably butchered that name, but I have talked with this person a lot in my YouTube comments, so I'm glad they sent a couple of pictures for us to look at. In this case, they want to get additional cells in their art, and they were using Amsterdam paints, some other cheap brand paints, and did a flip cup and did torch these. I have a couple that we'll look at here. We're going to do this straight pour first. So what feedback would you give here, Anna?
So I don't know if Manaki is looking for cells here in this. This looks like a ring pour to me. It could be a straight pour that ended with a ring. So I don't know if they're looking for cells here. What I see in this picture is I see that some of the paint colors have split a little bit. And I wonder if that comes from using a high quality paint like Amsterdam mixed with a low quality paint. Because sometimes when you try to blend the two, they don't play nicely together. And oftentimes the cheaper paint will kind of split and go all weird.
Yeah, I find that also, especially with the cheaper paints that have any white in them, because they use they use white, low quality white powders, and those are more likely to. It's called flocculation when it kind of separates there.
Yeah.
So definitely, and I would probably say if you want to keep that from happening, keep the paints slightly thicker. That will help that keep that from happening. You just want to make sure you tilt off enough so you don't have too much paint, or else you're going to get the opposite, get
Like canyon
cracks
cracks.
in your paint. Yep. So here's the next one, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit. It seems like this one was a little bit of everything.
It looks a lot like a dip. Doesn't that look like it to you?
Yeah, like
Or a
these parts
reverse
here.
dip?
Yeah, something like that. But then again, you get the color that didn't change there. So I don't know exactly. My guess here would be we have paints that were different consistencies, just because you have paints doing different things. You know, have some that are more solid and some that are more liquid around the edges. But I think this one's hard to tell. And she was worried
Right.
about cells, so I'd go to the next
Yeah, well,
painting
this
for
one
that.
I did wonder for the dark green color and the orange color. There's a lot of strange interaction kind of in the middle of the painting. And I don't know whether that is silicone in one of the colors that's like separating strangely, or whether it's just two different colors that are not playing well together, and so they're separating. So I can't tell if this is shiny because there's silicone or shiny because it's shiny paint. It doesn't look like there's silicone in it, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. So we might need a little bit more details to figure that one out, but at least there's
Yeah.
some feedback. And then on the last one, I actually really like this one. I think she
Oh
got
yeah, this one's
some great
beautiful.
cells, a nice circle. That's always my problem, is keeping that circle and not having to paint afterwards to get it to stay
Mm.
nice and circular.
Yeah, so this looks like it was a swipe outwards, maybe with some little pieces of paper towel or little plastic swipe tools. I think it's beautiful. I think those cells all have nice shape. I
Yeah, I
like it.
think so also. I think it's beautiful as it is, but if you want bigger cells, you want to use a little bit thicker paint. If you want if you want more smaller cells, you use a little bit thinner paint. Um, Also, depending on how closely you torch or how far up you torch, if you're not torching really hot, um, generally you'll have a couple cells form and they'll get bigger. If you put your torch really close down there, you'll get lots of little cells which will grow into each other, and they don't quite have enough room to grow very big. So I don't think either of those are bad. It's just something to do when you're using silicone in a painting like this.
And another thing to note on silicone and using a torch, there are some pouring mediums where you have to torch it in order to create the cells. Like a glue and water pouring medium, you get some cells without torching, but then the torch makes the cells just blossom. With Floetrol as your pouring medium, the torch doesn't really do much because the cells form from the silicone on their own.
Yep.
So I'm not familiar with the Pentart pouring medium, but some pouring mediums, they do best if you hit it with a little bit of heat, and others you don't need that.
So at this point, I'd say well done. I love this
Yeah.
painting. All right, so our viewer Karin, I believe it's Karin. If it's not, I apologize. Sent in a couple of different pictures, two kind of different types of paintings. This first one is a flip cup with silicone, I believe. And just right off the back, I actually really like this painting. I like the delicate green in there. Thought they got some great cells. The white shows well. I don't see separation of paint. So it really depends on how you want to change a painting, what you like or don't like about the painting. But otherwise, I actually really like this painting.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like this one a lot too. So she used some different brands of paint that she could get in South Africa, Zellcraft, Iris, and Fired Earth. And her pouring medium was glue and water, which works really well for a flip cup with silicone, especially when you can torch it to draw out those cells. I love this. I don't know that there's anything I would change about it.
Yep, I agree. So the next one here is the difference. I think the difference between these ones is on this one, they did use a house paint base. House paint and water is the base, and then paints over the top. And there are actually three, and I'm going to show them really quickly just so you can kind of see. And I think one of the things that a lot of people that are starting out with acrylic pouring do is they try and use different pouring mediums or different mixtures at the same time. And I think it trips people up a lot because it's harder than it appears. Even though you see people like Shelley Art and Sarah Taylor and people like that are using house paint in their paintings, getting the house paint to interact with regular paint is actually very difficult. And I honestly don't recommend anyone do that to start out with until you get a feel for how acrylic pouring works. And I think part of this painting is what happened there. The interaction between the gray, which I'm assuming is house paint and water, and the paints on top really didn't work well, which is why you get the kind of ghost colors out here on the outside.
Yeah, I would disagree slightly, actually. I love using house paint in my pours, but the caveat is you have to mix them exactly the same as you do your other paints. So if you're using a glue and water pouring medium for your paints, you have to mix your house paint the same way. With the Shelley Art technique, the house paint itself is the base. And the reason that the colors can lay on top of that is because there is house paint in the pouring medium for the other colors. So they're all essentially mixed the same way, but one is straight house paint. If you're mixing your paints with a different pouring medium, I say go ahead and use house paint as one of the colors, as the base, whatever. I've used it in a lot of different ways with great success, but you have to mix it the same. Otherwise, they'll interact strangely.
I was just going to say, when you say mix the same, are we talking about consistency or are we talking about ratios?
Similar mixtures. Like if you're going to mix, for example, Amsterdam paint with glue and water, you might mix it. You might have your glue and water pouring medium and you mix it at like 1-2 or 1-3 with your Amsterdam paint. And Amsterdam paint is a tube paint, so it's thicker. House paint is thinner. You might only need a 1-1, but you would use the same pouring medium. So if there's glue in your colors, there should be glue in your base as well.
Okay.
But
and then
the ratios are different.
Yeah,
the consistency should be the same. I know when I use Floetrol mostly, and when I mix house paint with Floetrol, often it's like 1-1, where my other colors are 2-1 or 3-1, so I need a lot less Floetrol because it flows well anyway. But you want to have the same ingredients going in, even if it's different ratios.
perfect. And that just goes to show that two completely different artists, we do things completely different ways, but still get results. So
Yep.
you got to find what works for you.
Yeah.
So really quickly, let's jump over to this next one. And this next one, for me, the paints were way too thin, which is why you get this, what are these called?
Like the dendrites.
Dendrites. That's the word for it. So you get dendrites because the thinner paint is just mixing into the thicker paint. So I think this is a consistency problem, and the white is probably too. I would say multiples are probably too thin, but that's what's causing this dendrites. Now, it's not necessarily bad. There's some great art that uses dendrites. It's just that's what's causing it, and if that's what you don't like, that's how you fix it.
Right. It also looks like this painting uses silicone oil in at least some of the colors, which is why it looks bubbly as well as just flowing out. Most Dutch pours don't use silicone, but it's a really cool effect to use it. I don't know that I would say that it's too thin, especially. I tell you, the only painting where I have had dendrites appear was in a paint and water Dutch pour, and it was a Master's Touch acrylic metallic that formed dendrites as it crossed over into the base paint. So I don't know if it's like too high of a percentage of water. I don't know exactly why, because that's the only time I've ever had it happen. It could be that it's too thin. It also could be just another unexpected reaction from having your base paint mixed differently than your colored paint.
Yeah, and my assumption is always that too thin is um, too much water, and I probably should have said that up front because
Yeah.
most pouring mediums will give at least a base set of body, and it's hard to get it thinner than that with a pouring medium. Although there are some that are a few of them that are very liquidy that might get you down
Yeah.
that thin.
But but I can't tell if the colors are thicker and the base coat is more watery, or whether the colors are more watery and the base coat is thicker. I really can't tell, but it's a strange interaction.
Yeah, my assumption is the colors are thinner, at least in the white here and then the gray here. So,
Yep.
but if you
That
do
would
ever
make sense
want
to me.
dendrites, you can overwater your paint and then just kind of drop it on, and it will go through the base paint as long as it has a little bit of body to it, the base.
This one is really pretty. I love the color combination of this one. I love the it's very jewel tones, gold and crimson and emerald. So I love the colors. I feel like this one, your paint consistencies were better because it looks like all the colors are kind of flowing together. I can't tell whether there's silicone in this painting or not, but you're getting some nice cells regardless. The one note that I would see is there's a bit of that cracking, and I can't tell whether it's cracking from drying or whether it's that flocculation, kind of the paint splitting. Yeah, down at the lower left in the white and up at the upper left in the white, it looks like it's your white paint that's splitting. So I don't know if the white paint is a like a cheaper paint. It might not be able to kind of hold its own with the other paints mixed at this consistency, but that would be my one comment.
Yeah, I also love these colors. I might have to uh, take a peek at this palette and do something with it, but I agree exactly with what you said. We appreciate you sending in these paintings, Karin, and hopefully that helped.
There's one more. There's one
There
more,
is?
I think.
Oh, there is one
Yes.
more. My apologies.
Yes. Yeah, because this one I think is your most successful hair dryer blowout or Dutch pour. It looks like your paint was all the same consistency because it flowed really nicely, and I don't see any cracking. I don't see any weird dendrites or strange interactions. So I don't know if your paint was thicker for this one or whether it was thinner, but it seems like you kind of got it figured out for this one, and I like it.
Yeah, I do too. Uh, Again, with all these paintings, it just depends on what you want to get out of it. You know, if you didn't like the red and the green, layering could be different, but I thought this was a success. The next here we have Dalia. Thank you, Dalia, for sending this. I appreciate all the comments you make on my videos, and I'm glad you submitted some of your art so I could see it and we could talk about it. So here, Dalia is looking for some generic feedback. With this one, we did school glue and water with the paints, and I actually really like the purple. That's one of my favorite parts about this. I like how separated the colors are. So, you know, sometimes you don't get a lot of that separation. And then uh, the the thing I think she wants some feedback are is the pinholes, and the pinholes happen because we mix the paint too vigorously and we introduce air into our paint. So there's a couple of different things you can do. You know, I always recommend uh, when you're mixing your paints not to do it really vigorously, just low or slow, and it's the turtle, not the hare, that you want to do here. Slow and steady to mix your paints. If your paints are a little bit warmer, sometimes I put them in a water bath just to kind of heat the paints up to help those bubbles percolate up to the top. What do you think, Anna?
I think this is cool. I like the color blend. I'm trying to look at it and go, how exactly did she do this? Because I'm not seeing kind of the telltale signs of, yes, this is a flip cup, or oh, this must be a ribbon pour. I'm just like I'm kind of confused as to how the paint got there. Um, so I don't really know how to give feedback on it. I think one of the things that I would say is, at least for myself as an artist, I like clean lines and I like kind of uh, like trying to find ways that I can make something intentional. This is not particularly clean and intentional, which I'm just saying the clean and intentional look is not for everybody. So I'm not saying that this is bad at all. What I'm saying is this is more kind of chaotic. And I don't know if you want chaotic. If you don't want chaotic and you're trying to get a little bit cleaner lines, I think what I would say is try to control your hand movements, or think about, like, if this is a flip cup, how are you picking up the cup? Because if you pick up a cup straight like this, you'll have paint dripping down from the edges, which is going to change your design. Whereas if you pull it this way, then you're going to get more of swooping lines. So just thinking about kind of how you're doing your movements may really change the way that the paint actually ends up on the canvas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've actually taken a canvas, just like you're saying, and done lots of things to the same colors on the same canvas just to see how different they are. And,
Mm-hmm.
like I actually, this section like I say, I love how the purple looks, but this section right here of the color in the black, I actually really like how that turned out. And I hope it looks like this one's still wet. So I hope it dries like that and it doesn't kind of bleed into the other colors.
It looks like that kind of turquoise and maybe the gold, they look metallic. Just the way the light is hitting them, they look
Hmm.
like they're going to be shimmery. So that'll look very cool when it's dry, too.
Yes, absolutely. And Dahlia gave us a little present here. Uh, I appreciate everything you do on my channel, Dahlia. Thank you very much. And hopefully we can have some more of these conversations in the future. So this painting submission comes from Kelly. And a little bit of background about this. The colors that we're using are Amsterdam Pearl Paints and Pabeo Iridescent Blue Black, which is a lovely color. Good choice, by the way. Her paints are mixed 2-to-1 Floetrol to paint, a little squirt of GAC 800, and then some water to thin. The difference is on this painting that they use a little bit of flow extender and kind of a base coat, and that is made of, it did have some Master's Touch pre-made ready to pour paint, and I'm assuming it's kind of an amalgamation of a bunch of different ones just based on the description we have, a bunch of different paints that we have there. And what she's looking for is trying to figure out why she got the cracking, and you can kind of see the texture that happens up here. And then I'm going to flip over here just to
Yeah.
get we can just go back and forth. But this is what I call this crazing. If they get to be really, really big, I call it cracking. Crazing is actually a slightly different, but crazing, cracking, same thing. This is what Kelly wants to avoid. So what do you think about this one, Anna?
So this one is kind of a puzzle because she's using good quality paints and she's using like a pouring medium mixture, which I use all the time, and it works well for me. The thing that makes me suspicious is that the flow extender, she said, included some of those ready to pour paints. Ready to pour paints, they are mixed with a pouring medium. So they are more of that, like Floetrol is different from a store-bought pouring medium. It's going to have a different consistency. It's going to behave differently. Even if it's at the same like thinness, they're not going to behave the same. Ready to pour paint usually dries much faster than a Floetrol paint. So she also said that it was a base coat slash flow extender. I can't tell if she put it over the whole canvas before she did the pour, or whether she did the pour and then put the flow extender around the edge to help it all cover. I'm not sure. Since she said base coat, I'm guessing it was pretty much across the whole thing. I also don't know which color was the base coat. My theory is that having the two different like recipes of paint, uh, having the different one in the base coat is causing a strange reaction as it dries. To me, this looks more like the kind of cracking that you get when a painting dries unevenly. Maybe it dries too quickly. Some of those kind of canyon looking cracks, that happens when the top layer of paint dries and the bottom layer is still wet. And so then as the bottom layer dries, it separates the top layer. So it might be some of that. It might just be that the different like chemicals in the paint mixtures are trying to dry at different speeds and they can't figure out what's going on, and so they dry unevenly.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually did a video where I mixed some paints with Floetrol, and then I mixed some paints with glue, and then I used those paints together, and this totally happened when you have different mixtures of pouring medium. Um, and I think you're probably absolutely right there. Another telltale is you get this texture. I don't know if you can kind of see it up here.
Yeah.
See, you get the texture here. And again, that is generally because the layers of paint are drying at different rates, which causes the, if the top's drying and it's pulling, it's moving with the bottom, and the bottom's drying and it's kind of pulling the top apart, that can happen. So I think you're probably exactly right on what's causing that. One thing you can do is leave your paint a little bit thicker, but if you do that, you have to make sure you tilt off enough of it, because a little bit thicker is going to give it a little bit more strength, but you have with thicker paint, you can actually leave more paint on the canvas, which will ultimately cause the same thing to happen between these layers. But that's one thing you could potentially change.
Yeah, if you use a lot of paint though, if you have a thick layer of paint, you want to make sure that your drying conditions are not too hot or not too dry. When I paint in my basement in the winter, we have a wood stove going, and it gets so dry in that basement. I've had so many paintings crack just because it's too dry. So sometimes you might need to cover your painting with a cardboard box to like make a more humid environment. So that might be it. I mean, it might be the base coat. It might be that it dried too fast. It might be, a number of issues. But certainly if you're using thicker paints and you don't want the cracking, make sure that you're not trying to dry it too aggressively.
Yeah. One last thing. Anytime you're working with iridescent paints that have metallics, things like that have mica powder in them, the consistency of those paints looks different than the consistency of other paints, even when they flow the same way. That's why I always do a drip test when I'm using metallics, because the metallics seem to be, if I mix them so it looks like the paints are the same consistency, the metallics are almost always thinner than the rest of the paints. So make sure not only are you're checking the consistency visually, but you're checking the consistency by doing some drops and letting them drip and making sure that all the paints are dripping at the same rate, because that's another thing. Having varying consistencies of paint could cause something like this, although in this case I don't think that was the case. I think it's probably the different types of paints that you used, as Anna mentioned. I'm excited to see what you do next, Kelly. All right, so while I have you here, Anna, I want to see if you'll give me some feedback on one of the paintings that I've done. A while back, I tried to do a galaxy pour, and I've tried this a couple of times. I'm very, on my channel, I'm very much do a little bit, kind of show somebody. I try and do things for about a month, and then I move on. So I want to go back to galaxy pours, so I'm hoping I can get a little bit of feedback. This is one I did. It was actually a while ago. I can't remember if I have a video. I will, if I do have a video, I'll look it up and make sure it gets in the show notes for this. But I liked the colors. I was trying to do kind of a galaxy pillars of creation type art. Let me just move in a little bit here. The black took over, and I mixed my paints right before I did it, so I know that'll help get rid of the pinholes, although they're perfect for stars.
Perfect for stars.
It's just blah. So
do you remember how you did it? Was it literally a galaxy pour, like a straight pour in the center?
Yeah, it definitely was a straight pour with a small black base.
Okay.
So you can see this is how the straight pour ended up.
I was going to say it looks like a ring pour or a straight pour there in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
I love the corner that has all the blue and green. I feel like that's awesome.
This one?
Yeah, that one. Yeah, that's super cool. And then the other corner where the color's kind of showing, it
This
looks
one
like
down here.
maybe you, yeah, torched up some of those colors.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember if that
Oh,
happened?
that I'm sure I used the torch uh, heavily on this painting. Yeah, I mean, just
Mm-hmm.
it was probably Floetrol, and you know how you get these with Floetrol paintings, but I'm sure I used the torch heavily there. So what I'd like to get is a little bit more of this kind of coloring in here. Um, but I don't want it to I want it to be a dark painting with some color on top,
Yeah,
and that's the really hard thing to get.
right. So, and what's when I do a straight pour, I find that often my favorite parts are the outsides, and then the inside is like it doesn't look the way I want. So I love wandering straight pours because you can start on one side and then you end up in like you never quite have to finish. It just kind of goes off one side. So I like doing that personally because you don't ever have that kind of ring in the middle. I don't know if you like that kind of straight pour squiggly middle part.
Sometimes,
Do you like that?
I mean, straight pours are my favorite pours to do.
Yeah,
But like you say, sometimes the middle isn't the showrunner, as it were. So
right.
I to be bluntly honest, I have never even thought specifically thought about, you know what if I make the end of the painting on the side so I can just take it off. So
Uh-huh.
that actually is a light bulb moment for me there.
So that's one of the things that I like to do. Also, that the part that you really liked, it feels very churned.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think because probably those were some of the first colors that were hitting and they were mixing with that black base and they just kind of like
You're
mixed
talking about
all
this
up.
side.
Yeah. And came up in those beautiful natural cells and layers.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the center is very clean colors because you were probably closer down to the canvas as you poured it out. And so it's very clean black and white or black and turquoise. I can't tell exactly what colors you
Mm-hmm.
used. Um, so I might, if you really like that kind of blended look, I might recommend having a really large kind of puddle of black and then in the cup, like on the canvas, and then your cup maybe have it be more colors, uh, like instead of three quarters black and one quarter colors, maybe half black and half colors, or like two-thirds colors and one third black or something,
Mm-hmm.
so that then as you pour it in, it's pouring into plenty of black and it's mixing, and then the colors get to pop out from underneath the black. But
Kind of like a
maybe pour
semi.
it
What is that when you have
kind of
a
like an open
little
cup.
cup, open cup? That's what it was.
Yeah,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, but pour it from the height so that it all goes down and under and kind of spreads out that way. And I think you might get that. I feel like the paint is churning, and that's my favorite look from a straight pour personally. So that might be a cool way to do it and not spend as much time like carefully pouring it out in the middle. Either just pour it from the height and then be like, all right, that's it, and then spread that, or start on one side and wander your cup until till the end of the cup is off the canvas.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
yeah, galaxies are they're hard because you're like, I want plenty of black, but I want plenty of color, and you never quite know how they're going to turn up.
And replicating space, you just can't do it. It's just space
No,
is too majestic for yeah.
yeah,
Unless you're detail painting, it's really hard to do in an
it
abstract way.
is.
At least for me.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
All right, Pony Nation. I hope that you were able to learn something, and thank you, Anna, for coming on to my channel to help us help our viewers.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
If we get additional feedback on the forum, which I'll link in the description below, we may actually do this again. So if you're looking to get this type of feedback for your acrylic pours, go ahead and check the comments below, and we will have that link. Give us all the information similar to the people that we've done before. And if we get enough, maybe later in this year, we can get back together and give you some specific feedback. Thanks again for watching. And if you haven't seen it already, I want you to go watch this seahorse video from Anna.